Hi, I'm George Yancey. Let's shatter some paradigms. And the paradigm I want to shatter today concerns Christianophobia in academia. Now, you may or may not have seen my video on Christianophobia. I define it as an unreasonable hatred or fear of Christians, and in the United States, that usually means conservative Christians. So, what do we mean by Christianophobia in academia? How may it differ in academia? Why would we suspect Christianophobia in academia? Once again, my video on Christianophobia shows that people with Christianophobia tend to be highly educated, which is academics, tend to be white, tend to be male, tend to be more wealthier than average, progressive, they tend to be irreligious. That describes academia. Now, just because that's the tendency doesn't mean that it is in academia. Perhaps academics have an ability to hold down their biases. So I did some research on this about a decade ago in a book called Compromising Scholarship. In that book, I sent out a questionnaire to academics and asked them would they be more or less willing to hire someone if they had a variety of different factors, one of which being evangelicals, one of which being fundamentalists, other types of Christian identities, other types of religious identities. What I found, and by the way, I went into this research suspecting some religious bias, but thinking it'd be more political bias. So I asked about if they suspected they were Republican or a Democrat. What I found was that there was more religious bias than political bias, which surprised me. Because I knew of Christian sociologists. I didn't know of any Republican sociologists. So that surprised me. About half of the academics I surveyed said they'd be less willing to hire someone if they found out that they were a fundamentalist. And about 40% said they'd be less willing to hire someone if they found out that they were evangelical. That is big when you're trying to get a job in academia, where one or two people who don't like you could sink your application. Now, it's not just my research. A research by a colleague named Inbar also did some really interesting work looking at the field of social psychology. What he found out, and he just concentrated on political bias. And remember, I found out that religious bias, especially against conservative Christians, is more powerful than political bias. But he found out that through his survey, that academics were saying that if they knew that a researcher or a project had a conservative leaning, had some sort of way of supporting political conservatism, they'd be less likely to accept a paper for review, less likely to invite a person for a symposium, less likely to fund a grant, less likely to hire someone. And the academics who are more progressive were less likely to see that bias in academia was a problem, which makes me suspect that the academics who are not Christians are less likely to see the problems of anti-Christian bias as a problem. This is serious because academia is one of the ways we create our culture, and having this sort of bias can be very problematic. I've experienced it in my own life. One semester when I was an adjunct, I didn't have a tenure track position as of yet. I had a semester where I taught sociology of religion, sociology of race and ethnicity, and 2 intro to sociology courses. I had a colleague of mine tell me that some people behind my back were saying, maybe we should not let him teach sociology of religion, because I was known as a Christian. Nobody said I should not teach sociology of race and ethnicity. I'm an African American. The idea that I'm biased because I'm a Christian, but not biased because I'm an African American, that boggles the mind. And even if I am biased, atheists are biased, agnostics are biased, we're all biased to some degree. What we do with that bias in our teaching, that's another question altogether. So, I've seen it in my life, in my own personal career. Why does this matter? How can this shape academia? Let me give you 2 examples that I think are quite telling. Now, I've made videos on these examples. One is on Christianophobia in general. Academics don't study Christianophobia. Very little do they. We say a lot on racism and sexism and all sorts of isms, Islamophobia, homophobia, not Christianophobia. Even though, as I've shown in another video, it's very real and it's not rare. And the people have it have a great deal of power. One can only suspect that we don't study it because there's Christianophobia in academia and you don't want to study your own flaws. Another example, I'm making a video on this, I have made a video on this, is Christian nationalism. And in the video I'll go more into why I think academics don't study Christian nationalism. But in a nutshell, Christian nationalism does not make conservative Christians look very good. And so, because of Christianophobia, it's natural that academics would want to really focus in on studying Christian nationalism. You probably have heard of it. It's very popular to talk about. One of the reasons why is academics have sort of given life to this idea. In my video, I'll discuss why there are some problems with this research and that there's better ways of thinking about it. But for right now, just think about Christianophobia and Christian nationalism. So it is clear that Christianophobia in academia has an effect on academics. And the effect is not a positive one for conservative Christians. And I understand, even though I'm a scientist and I believe in science, why some people are suspicious of science. So, what does this mean? It means if you study certain topics, you're going to have a hard time getting funding for it. If you're going on the job market as a Christian and a conservative Christian, my advice, unfortunately, is don't tell them that until you get the job. Ideas that may arise because of your worldview as a Christian, that's going to be harder to get published on. These are some of the problems that we have to deal with as we look at Christianophobia in academia. Does this shatter some paradigms? The paradigms that academia is this free search for truth and that all we have to do is just trust the academics, their biases don't matter. Well, maybe that's a paradigm that needs to be shattered. If you've enjoyed this, I ask that you would click the like, subscribe, tell your friends, leave a comment. All those things is things that people like me crave. People who do content like this. I hope if you like this, you'll come back. Maybe check out my videos on Christianophobia in the media or the Christianophobia video in general. Please come back so we can shatter some more paradigms.